Hi everyone, welcome to Awakening the Hips. For today we're going to start out standing up. So finding a comfortable place on your mat, feet about hip distance apart, a comfortable distance apart, arms just relaxed alongside the body. And we're going to take a few breaths here just to settle and prep for the movement we're about to do. Just allowing the rib cage to gently expand and soften. Nice, so from here, let's make our way over to a wall, couch, or maybe holding onto the back of a chair. We're going to rest our left hand on wall, couch, or back of the chair, and use the right leg. We're going to do some gentle leg swings, just allowing the leg to kind of swing forward and back, forward and back. And as we do this, I want you to notice what sensations you feel in the hip socket on that right leg. Notice how the pelvis feels. So we're going to be distinguishing the difference between movement at the hip and movement at the pelvis. Notice what is moving. Leg in the hip socket, or pelvis, or both. Now we're going to do a few more swings. This time we're going to be a little more deliberate. So we're going to place the right hand on the right hip bone, and we're going to keep the legs swinging, but this time trying to keep the pelvis still. So I don't want you to think of gripping to keep the pelvis still, but just moving, allowing the leg to swing softly as far as it can while the pelvis doesn't move around. So notice how that might feel a little different. From here, we're going to lift the knee in front of you. So bending, you're going to be bending at the hip socket, the right hip, the front of the right hip, and also bending at the knee. And you want the knee to be more or less in line with your right shoulder, so directly in front of you. Standing up nice and tall through the spine. And if you find that the spine is rounding, maybe lower the leg to a position where you can find your neutral spine and hold the leg a little bit lower. And we hold here, just noticing what muscles are engaging. And then we're going to swing the leg back, keeping the knee bent, and think of gently pressing the knee straight back. So we're going into a little bit of hip extension now. So you can almost think of gently pushing the foot back behind you. And again, your hand is on the hip, so I want you to notice if that pelvis starts to tilt. So you want the pelvis to maintain fairly still, and again, only moving the leg as far back as the pelvis is quiet. Nice. And let's gently release that right leg down, and we're going to turn around and do the same thing on the other side. So starting with some nice, gentle swinging with the left leg now, just forward and back, letting the leg do whatever it does. Do the toes kind of turn out? Do they turn in? Is the pelvis moving? Does the spine want to move a lot too? Are you having a hard time finding stability? Or do you feel stable on that right leg? And then now with the left hand on the left hip bone, now we're going to keep the pelvis still, if it wasn't still already, and do a couple more swings with the pelvis not moving at all. Keeping a sense of ease through the swing of the leg. There's no gripping. And then we're going to lift the knee in front, flexing at the left hip, bending the left knee, and lifting the knee as high as you can keep the spine nice and long. Again, aiming for that sense of ease throughout. And then gently pressing the knee back, coming into hip extension and holding here for just a little while, checking in with the pelvis with that left hand, making sure hasn't tilted. Nice. And then let's lower the foot down. So let's come back to the first side, so left hand on your wall. And we're going to lift the knee in front just like we did previously. And now we're going to take the knee straight out to the side, so out to the right. So you want the knee and the foot to be pointing in the same direction, out to the side. Keeping that right hand on the hip. So again, we can feel if the pelvis is moving at all. So this is another one that we want to keep the pelvis still. And from here, we're going to internally rotate the thigh bone in the hip socket and bring the knee back to that hip extension position that we were just doing. And as we do that, think of going almost like you're trying to bring the bottom part of the leg over a table. And then we're going to bring it back around. So again, lifting that leg over the table, internally rotating. Once you get there, then we begin to externally rotate. So the foot comes down, and then hug the entire leg forward. Let's do that again. Knee reaches out to the right. We internally rotate, lifting over the table and bring the knee back behind you. Hip is in extension. And then bringing the leg back around, externally rotating the thigh bone in a hip socket and bringing the leg forward in front of you. Let's do that again. Knee reaches out to the side. Internally rotate, keeping the pelvis as quiet as possible. It might lift a little bit, that's okay, but trying to keep it as quiet as possible. And bring the leg behind you. And then bringing it back around, externally rotating, and bringing it forward. Nice, and let's lower that right leg down, and we'll turn around and do the same thing on the other side. So lifting the left leg up, left hand on the hip, reaching the left knee out to the side, internally rotating through the hip socket, bringing the leg behind you, nice and controlled, coming into hip extension, finding that position, and then bringing it back around, almost like you're going over that table, externally rotating, and bringing the leg back in front of you. And again, so doing this 3 more times, I want you to notice what's happening along the right side. Are we leaning in towards the wall or the couch or the chair? So trying to stay up on that right foot, feeling big toe, little toe heel. Noticing where our weight is, trying to find that center point. Let's do one more. Reaching the knee out to the side. Internally rotating, reaching the knee behind you. And then bringing it back around, keeping the pelvis still as we externally rotate and bring the leg in front. And lower that left leg down. So that's a good exercise to really feel what's happening in the hip socket and getting through all the ranges of motion in the hip socket, and also noticing when the pelvis wants to get involved and start moving. Right? And this ties back into the previous class, gentle core connections, where our core has to stabilize us. And when I say core, I mean the entire torso, has to stabilize us as the limbs are moving independently. Yeah, so what we learned in that class translates over to this class as well, in that we only move as far as we can keep that stability throughout. So moving on, using a block or a few books to give you some extra height, you're going to place the left foot on your block, step up, and I want you to get a chair or turn yourself so that you're facing your couch and place your hands on the couch or chair. And we're going to swing the leg forward and back a few times. And as you swing the leg forward and back, we want to keep the pelvis still. And then we're going to bring the leg into hip extension, so bringing the leg back. This time we're going to keep the torso and the right hip in one straight line, or in that alignment, in the slight hip extension. And we're going to move the pelvis relative to the left thigh bone. So before removing the leg in the hip socket and the pelvis was staying still, now we're going to keep the hip socket still on the right side and move the pelvis relative to the left side, coming into warrior 3 or toppling tree. So reaching the torso forward, using our stability through the core to keep everything still in one place, and then we're going to make our way back up. Nice. And just going back and forth like this 2 more times, reaching the torso forward, leg lifts in the back, and coming back up. So the pelvis is moving relative to that left thigh bone. And again, reaching the torso forward, leg back, only going as far as is comfortable, and coming back up. Nice. Now let's set up for the other side. Standing with the right foot on your block or books, grabbing onto your chair and gently swinging the left leg forward and back a few times. Really just allowing gravity to take the leg as you do a gentle swing. And then bring the leg into extension, pulling the leg back. Nothing moves through the pelvis or the torso. And then we're going to make our way into our toppling tree. Gently reaching the torso forward, lifting the leg in the back. So you want to keep torso, pelvis, left leg in one straight alignment. Nothing moves. And then we slowly come back up. So again, the only thing that's moving is the right thigh bone in the right hip socket. And again, reaching forward, leg lifts in the back. Only going as far as you can maintain that alignment and come back up. And last time, reaching forward. Nice, and back up. So something else to look for with that one is if the free leg, the hip of the free leg, as you reach forward, if it starts to lift up. So you start to open up through the pelvis, right? So only going as far as you can maintain square pelvis facing the front. Now we're going to open the legs, standing with the legs a little wider than the hips and the toes pointing out. So as we do this, again, making our way into this position, I want you to notice what's happening in the pelvis. So as soon as the pelvis starts to anteriorly tilt, so that means tilting forward, the tailbone points out, back, you've gone a little bit too wide. So you want to keep the pelvis neutral, not tipping back, tipping forward, side to side. As we open the legs, toes pointing out, knees pointing out. And we're just going to play around with flexing at the hip. So we're going to bend the knees and allow yourself to lower, and then straighten the knees and come back up. So you're going to find that you're flexing at the hip, knee, and ankle. But I want you to really focus on what's happening at the hip joint. In terms of the knees, you want to try to keep the knees pointing in the same direction as the toes, so the knees point out. So again, we're going to lower down, checking in with those knees, making sure they're pointing out, and then checking in with the hip sockets. Notice what that feels like. Notice what's happening in the pelvis. Again, is the pelvis tilting? Is the tailbone pointing back? Only going as far as you can keep the pelvis neutral as you go straight down and straight up. Nice, let's do that again. Straight down and straight up. Last time we go straight down. This time we're going to hold for a little bit. Checking in with the pelvis. Are we tilting? Are we rocking? Are we rolling? Checking in with the knees. Only going as far as the knees point in the same direction as the toes. And let's straighten up. Nice. Let's bring the legs a little closer together. Still a little wider than hip distance, toes pointing slightly out. And we're going to squat straight down to the floor. So bending at the knees, hips, and ankles all the way down. It's okay if the ankles lift up off the floor. Going as low down as you can. Making our way into our squat, keeping the spine long. Let's chill out here for a little bit. Kind of get ourselves accustomed and familiar with this position if we aren't. Nice, and then we'll lower down all the way to the floor and make our way into tabletop. So now we're going to bring the hands under the shoulders, knees under the hips. And we're going to do a few more hip circles. So this is similar to what we did at the beginning, but now we're in a new orientation. So the muscles have to work a little bit differently. Now we're, instead of being perpendicular to the floor, we're parallel to the floor, the torso. So from here, I want you to think of bringing the right knee into the chest and just knee into chest. So just flexion at the hips. I don't want you to round through the spine at all. And then reach that knee out to the right. And again, we internally rotate as the leg comes behind us. So knee directly behind that right hip, foot kind of reaching up towards the ceiling, and then knee comes into the chest again. Now reverse that. Knee reaches away from you, coming into hip extension, foot up to the ceiling, out to the right, and then in to the chest. So there should be no rounding in the spine here. And then again, we reach the knee out to the right, around to the back, coming into hip extension, and then straight into the chest, hip flexion, no rounding in the spine, no moving of the pelvis. And then straight back, out to the right, and then in to the chest. Good. So doing this 2 more times, and I want you to think of gently pressing away from the floor as we do this. Keeping the breath nice and easy, so moving in a range where, yes, you're engaged, but you're not gripping, you're not forcing anything. Nice. And then when you're done, I want you to reach the right leg out to the right and place it on the floor. So the foot can be flexed, and you're going to lift that right leg up towards the ceiling, keeping the toes pointing in the same direction as your head as you lift the leg up off the ground and gently lower it down. And we lift and lower. A couple more times, and we lift and lower, lift and lower. Now we turn the toes to face up to the ceiling or towards the ceiling, don't have to face all the way up, and we do the same thing. We lift the leg just a few inches and lower, lift the leg and lower. Doesn't have to be big. Lift the leg and lower. Last time, lift the leg and lower. Nice. Bring the knee in under you, and then we're just going to tilt the pelvis back and forth. So almost like you're doing cat and cow, but just with the pelvis. Nice. Tailbone pointing up, tailbone pointing down. Nice. So now we're going to check in with the other side, starting with the left knee, hugging the left knee in towards the chest. Again, nothing moves, just flexion at the hip. Reaching the knee out to the left, internally rotating as we come to the back. Foot is reaching up towards the ceiling. And then hug the knee into the chest again keeping the spine long. And then we reverse that. Knee reaches back away from you, around to the left, and then hugs back into the chest. Knee reaches away from you, out to the left, comes around into hip extension, hugs in, hip flexion. And we extend at the hip, knee reaches back. Externally rotate as we reach the knee around to the left, and then in to the chest again, out to the left, around to the back, into the chest, reverse, reach the knee away from you, making sure that the pelvis doesn't tip down for this one, out to the left, into the chest. Last time, reaches away from you to the left, round the back, into the chest, reaches away from you, hip extension, pelvis doesn't move, glutes are engaged, out to the left, and into the chest. We extend the left leg out, toes pointing in the same direction as your head, and then we lift the leg straight out to the side, and we lower it down. And we lift it up and lower. It doesn't have to be big. Lift it up and lower. Last time, lift it up and lower. Turn the toe so it's facing towards the ceiling or more up towards the ceiling. Lift the leg up and lower. Lift it up, ease and lower. Ease through the body, lift it up and lower. Last time, lift it up and lower. Nice. Bringing that knee under you and tilting the pelvis forward and back. Forward and back. Forward and back. Now let's tilt the pelvis side to side. Nice. So now we're going to make our way lying on our side. If you have a pillow nearby, you can place the pillow under your head, or you can use your arm under your head. So let's lay on our left side, and we're going to do a common exercise called clamshells. So we want to bend the knees, so the knees are slightly in front of us, feet are together, and we're going to place the hand on our hip. So I want the 4 fingers to be in front and the thumb to be in the back. And I want the fingers to be not on your hip bone, but a little lower than, so that you can feel the engagement of the psoas, the big hip flexor muscle in the front as we do this. So as we move here, what you want to do is make the movement not super big, probably a lot smaller than you want to do. Keep the feet together as you open the knees and gently close them down. So you're just going to do that a few times, but I want you to check in for a few things. One is moving the entire pelvis. Is that right hip bone pulling back as you lift the knee up and down? So trying to keep that still. So it's really just the thigh bone in the hip socket that's moving. Another thing that we're checking in for with those 4 fingers in the front is, do we have engagement of that psoas muscle in the front? And it might take a little exploring to figure it out, because that's a common one for a lot of people. That psoas muscle wants to jump in and do the work instead of our external hip rotators in the back. Something else that you can do, and I got this from Susie Haitley, is you can just kind of tap in the butt area and kind of wake up those muscles and try again. And when you've done enough that you feel like you're getting a little burn, we can switch over to the other side. So something else that we want to check in with is, are we pushing away with that bottom leg? So you want to keep the bottom leg quiet, keep the pelvis quiet, and keep the psoas muscle quiet. So as we do the other side, again, placing the 4 fingers in the front, thumb in the back, a little lower than the hip bone, so you can feel the psoas muscle engage if it's going to be engaging. We can feel the hip bone, the pelvis tilting and moving. Quieting the bottom leg, waking up the muscles on the left side, giving ourselves a little tap, wake those muscles up, and opening the knee and closing the knee. And again, it doesn't have to be a big movement. In fact, it probably shouldn't be a big movement. Checking in, making sure that you're not rounding through the spine. Think of looking straight forward, not breaking the neck and looking down at your legs. Nice. When you feel like you've done enough, you can relax here and let's make our way onto our back. And we're going to plant the feet on the mat. Feet a little wider than hip distance for this one today. Not too much wider, but a little bit. Walk the heels in towards your sit bones. So you can just touch the edges of your heels with your fingertips or as close as you can get them. And we're going to lift the hips up off the mat. So as we lift the hips up off the mat, we want to gently roll the pelvis. So the idea of an posterior tilt or the tailbone pointing up as we roll up, and keeping that idea of the tailbone pointing forward and up so that we really engage in the low belly muscles for that support. You want to feel that the glutes are engaged as well, but they aren't gripping, but they're there doing their work. And then we're going to lift the balls of the feet up off the floor. So just the heels are on the floor. And we're going to rotate the legs internally and externally. Internally and externally. Just going back and forth like this. So we get all the glutes, all the muscles around the back posterior side of the pelvis start to have to work to make this movement happen. So it's a nice way to get all those muscles engaged and involved. Again, we have that lengthening. I like to think of lengthening of the lower back so that the pelvis stays in neutral. We don't want the tailbone pointing down to the mat. We want the tailbone pointing forward towards the front edge of your mat. When you've done about 8, 9, 10 of these and you feel slight fatigue starting, we can gently lower down. Let's bring the feet hip distance apart. Stay laying flat on the back, and we're going to lift the right knee off the mat, bending at the right knee. So we have the knee over the hip joint, and we're going to think of turning, externally rotating in the hip joint. So then the knee isn't moving, but it's just pivoting. And what's really happening is the thigh bone in the hip joint is rotating. So we're going to rotate in and out, in and out. So as we're moving the thigh bone in the hip socket, internally rotating, externally rotating, I want you to place your hands on your hip bones and notice if your pelvis is moving. So the pelvis should be still. So from here, we're going to make our way into threading the needle. So I want you to externally rotate in the hip joint. So the knee is kind of pointing outward and the foot is coming in towards you. So the shin bone is kind of like a door coming in towards you. And you're going to bend the knee as much as you need to, and you're going to kind of think of scooping the ankle in towards you with that left thigh, and then hugging the legs in towards you. So you can hold on to the underside of the left thigh on top of the left shin, or you can move yourself over towards the wall so that the left foot can plant on the wall, so you don't have to use your arms at all. So we're breathing, taking a few breaths into the outside of that hip. I like to think inhale creates space, exhale releases tension. And then we can gently release and set up for the other side. So planting the right foot, lifting the left knee, knee over hip, shin more or less in line with knee, and then internally and externally rotating the thigh bone in the hip socket. Hands on the hips, checking in with the pelvis, making sure the pelvis isn't also doing a little dance. So the knee isn't moving out or in or away from you or towards you. The knee is staying right over the hip joint and just kind of rotating around. The entire thigh is rotating in and out. And then we're going to externally rotate so that the shin kind of swings toward you, bending the knee as much as you need to so that you can kind of scoop that left ankle in with the right thigh, grabbing on underneath the right thigh on top of the right shin, or planting that right foot on the wall so you don't have to use your hands at all, which is quite comfortable. I'm taking a few breaths here. From here, we gently release that left leg. We're going to make our way into happy baby. So again, this is one where we often see people grabbing for the feet and end up peeling the pelvis up off the mat. The back starts to round. So what we're going to do is I want you to keep the spine on the mat. Spine is long. Lift the knees up off the mat, not holding on to them, and just kind of let them fall in towards you. Now you're going to open the knees so that they're more in line with your shoulders, and extend the feet towards the ceiling, so the soles of the feet are facing your ceiling, and then grabbing onto shins, ankles, or feet, wherever you can reach, keeping the pelvis on the mat, keeping the spine long, not feeling like you have to grab the feet and kind of force everything into position. Instead, bringing yourself into the position and then grabbing for where you can reach with a sense of ease, so you're not then bringing tension into the shoulders and the arms and the neck, and the neck starts to roll up off the mat because the shoulders are rolling up because you're trying to grab the feet, right? So that's a lot of compensation on top of compensation on top of compensation, and we're not actually getting the benefit or the targeting the groups of muscles and joints that we actually would like to target. Nice, so the spine is nice and long. There's ease through the neck and shoulders, ease through the arms. We're holding on to the shins, the ankles, the feet, wherever we can grab, and just taking a few breaths. Let's bring the knees into the chest, give ourselves a little hug. Again, not letting the pelvis roll up, keeping the spine long. If there's a slight space between the thighs and the belly and the chest, that's totally okay. You can gently rock side to side. Circle the knees a few times. Massage your lower back, pelvis into your mat, as long as it feels okay. And then we'll make our way into butterfly or Supta Baddha Konasana. Soles of feet together on the floor, let the knees fall open. Arms relaxed at your sides, palms facing up. And if this is not a comfortable position for you, if there's any pain, you can go straight into Shavasana with the legs extended. Or find a comfortable position that you can rest in, whatever that may be. So just allowing the body to soften and release here. And for those of us who are in butterfly, extending the legs whenever you're ready for your Shavasana. Allowing the breath to soften, allowing the body to relax, creating space and ease. You're no longer responsible for your body weight. I encourage you to stay here for as long as you can. I would like to thank you for sharing your practice and your energy today. Have a great rest of your day. One love. Namaste.